Hey, coaches, Coach Parker with CoachParker.org. How are you guys doing? Hey, I have got an article on teaching aggression in youth football. This has been a big question for the last month in my private youth football coaching forum over on Facebook. And so many people are asking about it, so I thought I'd try to address it myself. And so this is my shot. So here we go. So how do you teach aggression in youth football? That, like I said, that's been the question of the month. I think you really need to sort of reprogram the mama nice boy, the teacher kind of thing. Let's not hit or roughhouse. A lot of our kids don't really do that anymore. It's very controlled parental environment supervision. So we've got to kind of break that for football because that's not conducive really to the aggressive nature of football. So we need to get this nice boy put away when he's on the football field. And I kind of say, hey, when you put your helmet on, nice boy stays at home. Now we're a football player. And that's where it starts with this mental aspect of football versus the physical with these younger athletes, that, hey, it's okay to now be rough and physical out on the football field. What I've seen is a lot of rookies are just scared for the first few weeks of tackle football. I mean, we had a couple of kids quit last spring season just because we had 4 giant offensive linemen, and I'm sure they looked over there and said, oh my God, these guys quit the first week, didn't even pad up, didn't even buy helmets. They just showed up and said, nope, not going to do it. So it's kind of like for these rookies, I was trying to think of an analogy. It's like, hey, you haven't been an 8-year-old for a long time. It's like, what would it be like if I said to you, hey, go hop in the ring with Mike Tyson, and you're not a boxer? And I'm sure you're like, and I'm sure that's the same feeling that a lot of younger football rookies are feeling when they get on the football field. So you have to kind of remember back to your day and what it was like the first day. So we really don't want, for the sport, is to try to run these rookies off the first few weeks of practice, especially the first few days. You don't really want to have a meat day right off the bat. So it really begins with this whole mental thing with fundamentals, progression teaching. What I have found that's about 3% over the last 30 plus tackle seasons that'll kind of quit the first season or second season, and then about 30% will come back and try it again, maybe 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and then they'll try to decide if that's what's going to happen for them. And usually it's because they've grown. A lot of the timid players are smaller players. I've seen that. And some bigger players are timid because they're afraid to hurt somebody, and you've got to go through that. So what do we want to work on? It's really, to me, this whole mental, for the first couple of weeks, it's a whole mental reprogramming of the player. You've got to build their confidence, their grit, competitiveness, and let them know that hitting and aggressive is okay when they get on the football field and they put that helmet on, that we're going to actually reward this aggressiveness and go through that process. And then there's the physical part of it, which is really kind of acclimating to getting hit. Even the pros go through their whole preseason, spring season routines to get used to getting the pads and getting hit again. Hitting in pads and getting pads on is really not natural. So I've really started working on getting the boys, the children, used to their pads and helmet in the first couple of practices as we progress. So they understand that, okay, I got all this heavy equipment on. It's used to protect me before we jump into live action. They also need to understand, that with the physical thing that, football is rough and you're going to get bruises and scrapes and have to deal with that. And then there's another aspect of the physical part, which is the whole pain management thing. What is what is hurt, which is like a bruise and scrape, versus what's an injury, like, well, you broke an arm. So them kind of learning their bodies and what that all means really takes place in this football realm, and they've got to kind of reprogram themselves mentally and physically to say, okay, this is going to work for me or not. What I found that I put them in these character groups here. There's 4 kind of folks. There's Greg, who's naturally aggressive, loves to hit, very competitive. There's Tim, who's timid and is competitive, probably plays other sports. And he's willing and has the desire to play football and be aggressive. Then there's Charles. Heard this from Charles Barkley, great basketball player, very competitive, very tough in that sport, hated football, hated getting hit. So I think you have those athletes that are really good athletes, but they don't want to have anything to do with football, which is fine. They're great at another sport. And then there's Norton, which is he has no desire, no willingness to learn. His parents probably signed him up, trying to force him to get outside and meet new friends. And unfortunately, football is probably his first sport to ever try, which is not a good first, especially if it's tackle sport, to try, just because there's so much things going on with being on a team and coaches yelling. I would definitely try to sign a kid up for another sport before tackle football first. So the naturally aggressive players, some of them have this innate quality. A lot of them that I see are usually younger brothers because they're having to fight for stuff from their older brothers or siblings, cousins, and sort. Their environment, maybe they come from a harder environment. My mother was extremely aggressive. My dad loved to wrestle, so we were doing all that all the time before I got in football. Tier 1 athletes from other sports are just already programmed with coaches to be aggressive and competitive, so that kind of comes in there. I found people from hockey, wrestling, martial arts, lacrosse, those other physical sports usually kind of have this aggressive nature. Usually if the father played football or actually is a coach, they probably have this competitive, aggressive nature. And then, like I said, if their mother was an athlete, has a strong personality, assertive, that's going to help not be such a mama's boy, because usually she's kind of not, like, oh, baby, you got a bruise. She's like, hey, deal with that and let's go. So that to me is kind of like you're getting this naturally aggressive player, which is Greg. Here's Tim, very competitive by nature, is willing to learn, has the desire, highly coachable, has a can-do attitude, usually a smaller body type, but really kind of, okay, I can do this if we give him time to work into it. And he's playing other sports, and so he knows what it takes. And so Tim is willing to learn and has the desire to learn football and doesn't just want to shut down. Charles here is an athlete, but not into football. He may be a select baseball player or basketball player or soccer player. Really great at that sport, highly competitive, but hates hitting and football, doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Hey, that's great for them. They're an athlete, which is awesome. So you'll find those guys that just say, no, I'm not going to do this. So that happens. And then you've got Norton, which basically football is a hard no. Parents probably signed him up, trying to get him outside to get into sports. Unfortunately, maybe tackle is his first sport. So that's going to be a problem. So he just doesn't like sports in general, never really played anything else. He would rather be at home studying or on Xbox and not really outside. Just really doesn't show any desire to learn the fundamentals or make practice. So this guy's probably going to quit fairly early. And that happens. And there's not a whole lot of control you have over that except working and communicating with the parents. So how do we retool and reprogram these timid players? Well, it first comes with building trust, love, respect, and commitment from the coaches. All of them have to show that, and the player has to feel that, and that comes with positive communication and reinforcement. Learning names, I have found, is a huge thing with giving them nicknames and calling them by their names early, not just, hey, kid, come over, but really showing some attention. I bring fudge brownies per pretty early. We give out stickers. So showing them that you're into them and all the other coaches are into them and making them safe and trust and all that, that really works. We also talk about this superhero element where, hey, when you're on the football field, you're not really yourself anymore. You're the superhero. You can do everything. And so we're trying to give them a vision of what they can do. We talk about family. We're all band of brothers now. We're all out here to help each other. We do try to pair rookies with veteran players, get a friend. A lot of guys get on teams, they don't have any friends, and so they're just scared from that. So we try to do that. The players must feel safe during the drills and when they're out with you. So you need to make sure that when you're running these drills that you're not going to let them get hurt like in the first couple of weeks, because that really kind of screws it for everybody. Even the players that didn't get hurt, they're like, oh my God, this guy got hurt. So be aware of that, and we'll talk about that later. I think you also need to be honest. I know I just had this conversation this week that, hey, football's rough. You're going to get bumps and bruises and scrapes. If you've got an injury, though, where you can't get up, we use crocodile, which is our safe word, was, hey, I really need help. So we kind of institute that. If we have a timid player and we see that, but we know he can make it, we work with the parents, communication on how we can build the player's confidence, grit, toughness, maybe send them some YouTubes, maybe talk to them, maybe give them some extra practice time and pre-practice. So we work with that. The other thing that really helps is we try to make the players responsible for their equipment to get away from always wanting the parents to do stuff. So we, if they forget a mouthpiece, shoes, jersey, or whatever, and they're saying my parents forgot, we kind of talk to them about that's not your parents' responsibility, that's yours. And so we're really trying to get these young men and boys to grow up into young men and kind of man up and be that superhero. So we're really working on having them grow as an individual into a man. So let's talk about the physical aspects now, because that's some of the mental stuff we've talked about there. So it's really getting back to the basics, fundamental progression coaching, positive communication. Got to have knowledgeable coaches, motivational coaches that hype, and drills that are in competition. And some of this stuff, a lot of the things that I see is sometimes coaches with rookies, they'll just say, oh, okay, that was great. Get the back of the line. Make sure you're positive. You've got a helpful coach that's offside to the drill, that if somebody made a mistake, if you send them there, they can get some remedial work and then be good. But always try to sandwich in positive, negative, positive. So you give them that sandwich. We'll talk about progression coaching in a minute, but the knowledgeable coaches, this really comes into making sure that your coaches can coach techniques so that these smaller players and even bigger players can overcome some of their weaknesses so they can get confidence in what they're doing. You really got to build confidence. A lot of coaches are just kind of holder bag coaches. They're not motivational type coaches. So if you want your players hyped up and excited about hitting, your coaches kind of have to do that. And then also be competitive. They can't just be standing there talking to the other coach holding a bag and looking at the drill saying, okay, move on. So here's one of the things that we do with the drills on progression and separations to make it safer each season for the rookies. We usually go back each season and restart our fundamentals. And like a friend of mine said, he basically looks at everybody like a rookie again, which we sort of do too, because we put everybody back through pretty much a 3-day course of our basic drills. The first thing that you can do to help this out is separating players, separate drills by experience. Like there's a line for experienced players and a line for rookies. Kind of do that. Separate drills by skill levels. We've had some monster skill level guys that could tackle really well that we don't really want to have a rookie going against at first in these drills because it's not going to be good. Separate drills by size, really having, if you can have 3 stations, small, mediums, and bigs, that really works out, and then kind of have champions to come together so everybody gets that. But trying to put all that together sometimes scares these smaller players. The same thing with aggressive players. We've had a couple of guys that love to take heads off of rookie players. We've got to keep that separated. You just have to be aware of that. The other is you really want to start out like with your progression. We use the Seahawk progression. We use the blocking progression that I grew up doing as a kid. We're not chicken wing blocking anymore, but we're engaging. So we go through that whole thing. And here's the progression training. It's really show, explain, demo the drill with coaches or experienced players, kind of show everybody how it's going to work. The speed is slow to fast. We'll do walks, 50% thud, full, and then live, player. And really, we start out in this fit and finish kind of spacing at first. We're using bags versus players at first, trying to compact the spacing within 5 yards so there's no big, huge hits. It's a very controlled environment. We'll sometimes only do 1 station in the first couple of times, just trying to make sure we've got enough coaches that is seeing and correcting and making sure it's going on before we have multiple stations. And then all of the coaches that are in the deal need to give, they need to be positive. We don't really want to have any kind of negative feedback other than, hey, that was great, but let's try this. And why don't you go over to Coach X and he'll teach you some more and kind of do that. So that's the whole separation and progression training, which that's been a big, huge help for us to do it this way. And because we're always getting kind of new teams every year. So we've kind of perfected this. Here's a couple of things that I have learned trying to go through drills and overcome the physical problems with timid players. And I've found that timid players just really, I personally feel like timid players need to get used to their pads and equipment. And once that's accomplished, then you can go through that. I do this sumo drill. It's kind of like a wrestling thing on their knees. Roman Greco wrestling, they push the guy out. Butt rolls are great. Bear crawls, stance starts, tug of war, forward fits on back, walkthroughs on back. So they're just all trying to get used to all of this equipment and understand, hey, I can roll around, bump into people. I'm not going to get really that hurt. And once they kind of click into that works. And then you've got some intro drills, which is really coming off on some, how to get used to everything. Kind of do that. And then got physical drills. And I'll go more over these on the next video on specifically what we're doing here for that. There's a blog post which I wrote over on coachparker.org that goes into a lot more detail. If I left anything out, please leave me a contact. There's my contact info. As always, you want to support me, there's my books. But this is my take on teaching aggression in youth football. Head over there to coachparker.org. Check it out on the blog. I appreciate you doing this. See you guys next time. Ciao.